This conference will now be recorded.
So in yesterday's session, we were discussing about Docker file instructions. We discussed about we discussed about copy, we discussed about add, we discussed about run, we discussed about CMD. So the CMD instruction is used to execute whatever command which you want to execute, whatever command you want to execute while starting the container. Whatever command you want to execute while starting the container, you can set that using CMD. Okay. So Nitin is asking one question, right? If I have 1 to 10 builds, 10 build fails, then 12th build is successful. So the Docker tag will be 12. Like that, there is no order, right? So that is how it works, right? The build number, if you take, that is how it works. Why do you want to build your image if there is a failure in the build? You don't build, right? So if you take the build number, that is how it will be incremented in the Jenkins. Order doesn't matter. Are you going to look for a artifact for a failed build, guys? Forget about Docker. Are you going to look for an artifact in the repositories artifacts for the failed builds? You are going to look for the artifacts only for the whatever builds it is successful. That order doesn't matter. It no need to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, something like this. If the build is successful, there will be a artifact for that build. Otherwise, you take commit ID, you take the commit ID, you take the branch name and commit ID combination. Tag is some number which should be unique. That's it. That can be a build number, that can be a commit ID, that can be a branch name underscore commit ID. Tag is something should be unique for that build. That's it. So let's try to continue. What is CMD? CMD will execute. CMD will execute. Nitin, that's what I told, right? I used build number in some project. I used branch name and commit ID in that project. That doesn't matter, man. There should be a unique tag for that build. That can be a build number or that can be a branch name and commit ID. Will those two will be unique for each and every build in Jenkins? Will those two will be unique for each and every build in Jenkins? Does build number will be remain? Does the build number will be same for any build, or build number will be unique? If I run my pipeline 10 times, will the build number will be same? Don't ask me to teach again Jenkins. Does build number will be different for each build? Do you get a unique for each build? Or branch name and commit ID? Does those two combinations will be unique? So tag is something which should be unique for that build. You take a build number or you take a combination of branch name, commit ID, whatever it is. Based on the requirement, right? You can use whatever it is, something unique. So if you have these kind of questions, I'll suggest you to keep in the Skype group, ask in the Skype group, because I am explaining something, you are asking something else. So I will suggest you to ask these kind of questions in a Skype group rather than directly in the class, because it will waste others' time and it will deviate the topic also. Now, let's try to focus on what is the CMD. The CMD commands will be executed while starting the container. While starting the container. So the CMD use case is to run the process, whatever process I want to start. As we discussed already, can I have more than one CMD in my Docker file? That can be base image or our own image. Can we have more than one CMD? Technically we can have, but it is going to execute only the recent CMD. Let me show that. Let's say this is my Docker file. Here I have a CMD something like this. Let's say something like this. And let's say something like this. I have two CMDs. Which one will be executed if I have more than one CMD now? What is the latest? So Bhanuchandra is saying latest. Which command is latest? Which command is recent or latest? I mean to say the recent one in the order. So this one will be executed. Let me show that. First, let me build the image. Now image is built. If I run the container out of that image, so I got this output. How come I got this output? What command got executed? And why I can see this list of directories? So as per my Docker file instruction, what is executed? This CMD got executed. Now, even though we have more than one CMD, only the recent one will be executed. The CMD is used to start the container. Before I go for a next topic, we have one more instruction called entry point. One more instruction called entry point. Now, before I go for this, let me try to explain one more concept called shell form and executable form. Shell form and executable form. So what is this shell form and what is this executable form? Let's try to understand. We can define run CMD entry point instructions. We can define run CMD entry point instructions in a shell form or executable form. Sometimes in the interview, you may get a question, what is shell form, what is executable form in Docker, right? So this run instruction or this CMD instruction or this entry point instructions can be defined either in shell form or either in executable form. So shell form, something like this. Shell form, something like this. Directly your command, whatever command space separated arguments, something like this. Run and your command cmd, your command entry point, your command and arguments in the shell form, something like this. Example, run, just to give an example, I am giving this, something like this. So shell form, something like this. In case of CMD also, we can define CMD in a shell form, something like this. CMD, date, CMD, whatever. You want to execute some script, shell script, or you want to execute, you want to start your Java application within the container, something like this, in a shell form. Entry point also same. I'll come to this. What is entry point? I'll come to this. But before that, let's understand what is this difference between shell form and executable form. In case of shell form, we can define instructions something like this. We can define run, CMD, entry point instructions in a shell form or an executable form. This is shell form. Shell form. Now, in case of executable form, it will be something like this. We are going to define something like this, executable form. So it will be something like this, run, your executable, comma, argument 1, comma, argument 2, something like this. Like this, you can pass arguments, right? So something like this. Example, if I want to define this in an executable form, it will be something like this. Something like this, executable form. Argument 1, argument 2, something like this, argument. Same for CMD, also something like this. Suppose this is the case. Something like this in a executable form. So how different? What is the difference between shell form and executable form? How it works? But at the end of the day, are you getting a same output, whatever, whether I define in a shell form, whether I define in a executable form? Output, does the output will be same? The output remains same, but how it is going to process in the background will be different. How it is going to process in the background will be different. How the command or that the command will be executed in the background, right? So if I use shell form, how it is going to execute in the background. If I am using shell form, how it is going to execute in the background. Suppose in shell form, the commands will be executed as below. So it will be executed like this: bin slash your shell, whatever it is, then -c that command and arguments. So in shell form, the commands will be executed as below in the background, as below. Okay. So which means, suppose this is my command, right? So this is my command. So how it is going to execute in the background? The Docker will execute this something like this. The shell, that can be a bash or that can be sh, something like this. Bash -c this way. So if this is the case, this is your command. In the background, how it will be executed? It will be like this: /bin /bash -c this way. This is how it is going to execute. Now, if you understand closely, if I have defined the instruction in a shell form, is your command will be running as a root process, I mean to say parent process within the container, or it will be running as a child process under shell? What is the actual process? If I define my command, or if I define my entry point as a shell form, what is the actual process? Is this is your actual process, actual command, or this is going to be child under shell, child under bash? That will be child under bash, right? So this is how it is going to be executed internally when I am using shell form. But if I use executable form, how it will look like? In case of executable form, it will be executed something like this: /bin / your executable, then argument1 and argument2, something like this. Now let's take, this is my command. So how in the background it will be executed? It will be /bin your executable, this one, then -p the other argument -test. Suppose this is your command, right, in an executable form. In the background, how it will be executed? /bin /java -jar app.jar. So this is how it will be processed in the executable form. If I am using executable form, then your command, that command will be processed as a main process, or it will be executed as a child process if I am using executable form? Will it be a main process or will it be a child process in an executable form? It will be the main process, right? But when I use shell form, it will be executed as, this is the main process, bash or shell. Under that, this will be executed as a child. But at the end, is it going to do the same functionality? Is it going to execute same command, same output? Are we going to get the same output? Is it going to execute same command? Yes. But there is a difference in execution. Now, let me tell you one issue we faced one issue we faced long back in Docker. Sometimes in the interview also, can you tell me one issue which you faced in your project, you can explain this issue, whatever I'm going to explain now. So we were not aware about this shell form. We were not aware about this executable form initially. We have a Docker file where we are Dockerizing one Java-based application. We used OpenJDK as a base image. We copied the jar file, that application jar file, to the image. Then we were having a CMD like this, java-jar. How to run the jar file, guys? How to deploy jar file? You already know what command we will use. How to run jar files? Java-jar, right? So we don't know anything earlier about this shell form, executable form. We have defined like this. In my Docker file, we have defined something like this. So this is which form? This is which form? If I define like this is in which form? The command has been defined in which form? Shell form. So what was happening? We defined this way, application is getting started, but whenever there is some issue with application, your container is getting killed or container is getting stopped. Whenever we are stopping the container or whenever we are killing the container, whatever resources has been acquired by that application, resources in the sense like heap memory and the database connections, database connection pools, whatever resources like heap memory, the Java, there is a concept called heap memory in Java. So whatever heap memory is acquired by that Java process, or whatever database connection pools it has acquired that by that process, it is not getting released when we use this form. Whenever containers are getting stopped, whenever containers are getting killed, the heap memory, like whatever resources like heap and the database connection pools, is not getting returned. It is not getting released. Why? What could be the reason? When we check more on this one, when we execute this Docker stop or when we do this Docker kill, our container is getting stopped itself. What process will be notified, guys? What process will be notified? The main process. The main process. The main process, whatever is going to be run. So in case of this way, what is your main process? Is Java is main process or shell is the main process? Java is not main process. That is what I explained so far, Shubham. If I use a shell form, how it is going to process internally? This is what I have explained so far. Is Java is the main process or bash is the main process, under that your Java will be running like as a child process? This is what I explained so far. So this is shell form. So in the background, how that will be executed? This is how it will be executed. So in that case, is this is the main process or this is the main process? Bash is the main process. So whenever containers are getting killed or containers are getting stopped, which process will be notified? Which process will be notified that the process is about to be terminated or the process has to be stopped? The main process. So bash is getting notified. Bash is getting notified that it is about to be killed. But is the child process, is the child process is aware that it is about to be killed? Is it about to be stopped? No. So that's why the Java process is not getting stopped smoothly. The Java is not getting stopped smoothly. The Java process is not releasing the database connections pools. It is not releasing heap memory because it doesn't know that it is about to be killed in this form. So we identified what is going to happen in the background. Then later we changed from shell form to executable form, something like this. Shell form to executable form, something like this. So in this way, as which process, how it is going to work in the background, how it is going to execute in the background, it is going to start something like this. So this way, what is the main process now? This way is your executable, is this is main your process. So whenever it is getting stopped, or whenever we are killing the container, our containers are going down itself, does this process will be informed that it is about to be stopped, it is about to be killed? It will be informed, it is going to aware it is about to be stopped, about to be killed. So it is going to release the resources like database connection pools or heap memory smoothly. So especially for CMD and entry point, what is the recommended form? Especially for CMD and entry point, run doesn't matter because run will be executed while creating a image. Run can be defined in a shell form, run can be defined in an executable form, that doesn't matter. It doesn't make much difference for a run. But CMD and entry points, especially CMD and entry points, these are the commands which is going to start your process in the container. So especially CMD and entry point, what is the recommended form in which we need to define? In which form it is recommended to define your commands or instructions to start the container? Executable form. So if we are using executable form, that executable will be running as a main process. That executable will be running as a main process. Instead of executable form, if I define shell form, does that command will be running as a main process? If I define in a shell form, if I define in a shell form, no. So we will encounter these kind of issues. So in interview, sometimes they will ask, can you tell me one issue which you faced in your project? Do you guys will be able to explain whatever I have explained? I have given CMD in a shell form. Because of that, we were facing some issues. How it was executed internally. Then later, what is the solution? So especially for CMD and entry point, what is the recommended form? In which form we need to define the commands? Especially for CMD and entry point. Executable form. If you see any Docker file, whether your Docker file or base images Docker file, if you see any base images Docker file or your own Docker file also, if you see, let's see Tomcat base image. The Tomcat base image Docker file. If you observe any Docker file you take. So this run instruction is in which form? They have defined run instructions. In which form these run instructions are there? In which form these run instructions has been defined? Shell form. But when it comes to CMD, in which form they have defined? Executable form, right? So for entry point and CMD, what is the recommended form in which we need to define the instruction? we can define CMD in a executable form. Now, let's try to understand what is difference between CMD and entry point. What is difference between CMD and entry point? Now, let's try to understand. As I told, CMD will be executed when? Already I explained CMD will be executed while starting the container. So this entry point also will be executed. This entry point also executed while starting the container again. While starting the container, entry point also will be executed while starting the container. Then what is the difference between CMD and entry point? There should be a small difference, right? Otherwise, why we have two different instructions? Otherwise, why we will have two different instructions? CMD also will be executed while starting the container. Entry point also will be executed while starting the container. Then how different? What is the difference between CMD and entry point? So what is the difference? CMD commands or instructions can be overridden while creating a container. I mean to say, we can override the commands, CMD instructions, while creating the container. Entry points cannot be overridden. CMD commands can be overridden while creating the container. Entry points cannot be overridden. We can set entry point for your container, which means what command has to be executed. We can set an entry point for your container. What command has to be executed while starting the container? So this entry point will be executed while starting the container. But how different it is from CMD and entry point? CMD commands can be overridden while creating a container. Whereas entry points cannot be overridden. What is the meaning of overridden? What is the meaning of overridden? Can I change my CMD while creating a container? Let's take this example. So this is my Docker file. What is the command as per my Docker file which needs to be executed while starting the container? exec is different, Sunil. exec is different. exec is you can execute a command on an existing container. There is a container, you want to execute some commands, you can execute and see. So is the process is going to be changed? Like while creating a container, if you see this example, I executed lot of commands on Tomcat container like this: exec, container ID. We executed some commands like this ls pwd, but is it changed? Is it overridden this CMD? Is it overridden that CMD whatever we have in the Docker file? We have something like this. Is this is replaced with whatever I have done? This is what we have in the Docker file. When I execute something like this, is this command is getting changed with this one? Is this command is changed with this one? No. So overriding is something different. While creating a container itself, instead of this one, I can change something else while creating a container itself. Now, if you take this as an example, what is the command which will be executed while starting the container as per this? ls. Now, while creating a container, what is the meaning of while creating a container? When I am doing Docker run or when I am using Docker create, can I change this one? Instead of ls, I want to do something else. When I am doing Docker run, when I am doing Docker create, while creating a container, I can change. If I am not changing anything, do you see, is this getting executed? I am not overriding anything. Do you see this command is getting executed? Now, I can override something like this. Docker run, your image name, all the options, whatever you have. But at the end, after the last, can I give some command? Something like this. Now, instead of this, let's say something like this. Now, which one will be executed? Now, as per my Docker file, this is the command. I am overriding. Now, will this replace it with this one? I mean to say this completely. Is it going to be replaced with this one? Can I see? Is this command got executed as per my Docker file, or this command got executed now? The pwd. Instead of pwd, if I say date, do you see? Is that command is getting executed? Whatever while creating. Am I able to override the command if I am using command? We can override the command. But instead of cmd, let's say I have an entry point. Instead of cmd, let's say I have an entry point. Let's say instead of cmd, I have an entry point. Something like this. So let's say instead of cmd, I have an entry point. Something like this. Entry point. I'm going to define in which form? This is which form? So I have an entry point, something like this. Let's say, just to give an example, I am using this. Or something like this, any command. This can be any process. Something like this. That can be any process. That can be shell script. You are trying to execute shell script. That can be you are trying to execute Java commands. You are trying to execute Python commands, Node.js commands, whatever it is, right? So I have defined as an entry point. Now this, let me build this image. Now let me build different image. This is my Docker file. So in case of different name, what option I can use? I want to build an image from different Docker file. -f. Then build context. Now this image contains entry point. If I want to see more details about that image, can I do the inspect, Docker inspect or image inspect? Now, if you see, that has what? That has what? That has a that has an entry point. That has an entry point. Now, if I create a container out of that image, sorry, not this one, image, not image one, image two. Now, am I getting that output? So, is this is getting, sorry, is this is getting executed? Is this is getting executed? Can I see that output when I'm creating a container? Now, since I have an entry point, if I try to override something like this, what will happen? What will happen? Now, what will be the output? Let me give the options. Option 1, this is the output. Option 2, this is the output. Option 3, error. Option 4, this one as well as this one, both. Option 5, something like this. What do you guess? So give your answer. I'll be back in 1 minute. Try to guess your answer. Now, this is my Docker file. This is my Docker file. Using this Docker file, I created an image and I am trying to do this way. So what is the output? So what is the answer? Most of the people said 1. Most of the people said 4. Okay. So some people said 5. So let me show you. What is the answer? This is the answer. This is the answer. So we cannot override entry point. So what is my entry point, guys? I mean to say, what is this entry point? In this one, what is the entry point? I mean to say, what command it is going to be always executed. What is the entry point? As per this Docker file, do you see echo? Echo is the entry point. So this is one argument. This is one argument. Whatever I am passing at runtime also, will this be taken as a command or will it be taken as an argument for this entry point if I have an entry point? Will it be a command anymore or will it be taken as an argument for entry point? This will be taken as argument for entry point. In that case, how it will be processed? Echo. It will be processed like this. Echo, this one, and also this one also as an argument. So in that case, will I get this output? We get this output. Let me show you. Now can I see that? Echo is my entry point, argument 1, and whatever I am passing at runtime also, it is taking as an argument. Now, one more question. Can I have CMD and entry point together in a Docker file? Then how it works? So can I have a CMD and entry point together in a Docker file? Then how it works? Let's say this one. In real time, you are not going to have like this, but just to give an example, how it works. Whether I have entry point first, CMD last. Let's say I have CMD like this, something like this, or CMD first, entry point last, or entry point first, CMD last. That doesn't matter. I can have CMD first, entry point last also. Now how it works? Let's create an image like this. Let me build the image. Now I created image like this. So this has a CMD and entry point in the Docker file, both. Now what will be the output? Again, can you guess? So output, do you see something like this? Let's say this is how it is there now. Let's say this is how it is there now. Now I am creating a container. So what will be the output? Do you see something like this? Maybe let's take this one. So this one error, this one, and this one. What do you think? So the answer again here is 5. The answer again here is 5. If I have a CMD and entry point together, whether I am passing this command at runtime, whether I have this command in the Docker file itself, if I have an entry point, this will be taken as what? Whether I pass at runtime or whether it is there in the Docker file itself, that CMD. So that will be taken as what? This will be taken as an argument for your entry point. So if you see now, Docker run image 3, that image has both. Can I see this like this? So which means if I have an entry point and CMD together, does this command will be command anymore, or this will be an argument for entry point? That will be an argument for your entry point. Now one more question. Let's say now I am doing this. Let's say I'm executing something like this. This is my Docker file. I'm passing this one at runtime. So what will be the output? What do you think? Now I have this entry point and a command as a date, and I am passing something else at runtime. What will be the output? So this will be overridden, this will be changed, this will be completely overridden with this one, and this will be passed as an argument for entry point. So can I see the output as something like this? This is completely overridden with this one. This will be completely overridden with this one, and since I have an entry point, this will be passed as an argument for your entry point. Something like this. Now if you see, can I see output as like this? Like this now? And if I don't pass anything, this is part of my Docker file, entry point and CMD. If I don't pass anything, again, can I see this? Something like this. We can see something like this. As I already told, does the order matter whether CMD is defined first, entry point last, or entry point first, CMD last? Does the order matters here? If I have a CMD and entry point together, I already told that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any change. I already told. You swap the order and see same behavior you observe. Same behavior you observe. So do we really have CMD and entry point together in most of the Docker files, whatever you do? No. But if you have some scenario, let's say I am going to tell you one use case. Let's say always I want to execute some kind of a command, that can be anything. Suppose I want to execute some script, let's say, and this argument is there, right? Sometimes I want to pass as, let's say something like this. Sometimes I want to pass this as something like this. Always I want to execute this one, but I should have a flexibility of this argument. So in this way, can I define my Docker file something like this? Entry point, entry point, entry point as this sh, this test.sh, just to give an example. Test.sh. Always I want to execute this one. Now, if no one is passing any value, this is the default value. So while creating a container, if no one, we are not passing any argument, so how it will be executed? Will it be executed something like this? This is the default value. But while creating container, I should have a flexibility. I want to pass different argument for that entry point. So instead of run, if I say something like this, start. Now how it will be executed? At runtime, if I pass this way, will it be executed something like this? With this argument? I'm just giving an example for this one. Let's say this can be anything. Let's say your entry point is Java. Let's say your entry point is Java. You are executing some Java command. Java -jar, your jar file name. And there are some arguments you want to pass. Some arguments, maybe some kind of a runtime arguments, right? Some kind of runtime arguments. Something like this, some kind of a runtime arguments. So can I pass different argument at runtime if I have this one? If I don't pass, this will be taken, right? So if you have these kind of requirements, can I use combination of CMD and entry point together? Default value I can define, default argument for my entry point I can define as a CMD. This can be changed while starting the container. Flexibility. If you have these kind of requirements, can I use the combination of CMD and entry point? Yes. But most of the cases, you see only either CMD, either entry point. In most of the cases, 99% you either see CMD or either you see entry point, not both. Okay. So are you guys clear? What is run? What is CMD? What is entry point? What is difference between CMD and entry point? It's very, very important in an interview perspective, as well as once you get into a job, you may need to write Docker files. So you should know what is what in Docker. Now, we discussed about, again, the way Abhi is asking, can we have more than one entry point? Again, if you have more than one entry point, which one will be executed? Again, Prashant is asking same question, whatever Sunil asked. Let me tell you. They're asking this question. Sir, what if I have this CMD first, then entry point later? I already told, is it going to make any difference? Now I am going to have this, something like this. Is it going to make any difference? Let me build that image. Let me build that image. Now, let me create a container. Do you see any difference? Now, this I moved to first. This I moved later. Do you see any difference? Whether CMD first, entry point last, or entry point first, CMD last, do you see any difference? No. Now, if I have more than one entry point, again, what will happen? If I have more than one entry point, what will happen? The recent one. If you see, let's say I have entry point like this. Now I have entry point like this. Entry point as LS. Now which entry point will be considered now? Let me build the image first. Now let me create a container. So what happened? How it is processing? Now how it is processed, since I have multiple entry points, which entry point got executed? ls slash has been executed. It has listed all the directories. Since I have a CMD, is it trying to execute something like this ls date? This command, is it trying to take as an argument for this ls? So if I have multiple entry points again, do you see same behavior? The recent entry point will be executed. Yes, very, very important. In the interview, you will see lot of questions on the Docker file. What is run? What is CMD? What is entry point? What is copy? What is add? Lot of cross questions. Like difference between Docker CP and copy, difference between Docker run and run versus CMD versus entry point, kind of these questions, lot of cross questions you will get. like this, you will get a lot of cross questions. Okay, unless until you are very clear, you cannot answer these kind of questions. Okay, unless until you are practicing, unless until you are attending all the sessions, you cannot explain all these questions. Okay, now these are very, very important instructions which we already discussed from CMD, copy, add, run, entry point. Like we have few more commands which is simple and straightforward. There is a command called workdir. There is an instruction called workdir. What this workdir will do? The name itself is saying workdir. Using this workdir, what we can do? The name itself, it is saying working directory. Working directory. Can I set the working directory for a container? For an image, for a container? I can set a working directory like this. So in my Docker file, in my Docker file, I can do something like this. Workdir. If this working directory doesn't exist, is it going to create, guys? Suppose if this directory doesn't exist in the previous layers or in the base image, is it going to create the directory and switch the directory? It is going to create and switch, something like this. It is going to do both, something like this. It is going to do something like this, mkdir and cd. Suppose if I do something like this, if this folder doesn't exist in the base image or previous layers, is it going to create first the directory and then switch to the directory? Yes. But if this directory is already exist, is it going to switch directly, something like this in the background? Is it going to change the directory, working directory? Yes. Let me show you. Now let's say, let's do this. I have not created any working directory, or I have not set any working directory. Now I'm just saying printing the current working directory. Now if you see, what is my current working directory for that image or for that container? If you see what is the current working directory as of now, that one. Now if I say in my Docker file, let's say workdir /opt/test, something like this. Now any instructions I execute after this workdir, that can be run instruction, that can be cmd, I mean to say that can be cmd, or that can be any instruction. That instruction will be executed in which directory? After this, whatever commands I have, that will be executed on which directory? Suppose here I have something like this. Suppose here I am copying. Here I am copying some file. If I just give dot, also, so in which directory it is going to copy? Suppose I am trying to copy some file, this file. Even though here I give dot, so in the image, which directory it is going to copy? This one. Now, if I try to execute some commands, like I'm downloading some files or I'm adding some files, right? So all these instructions also will be processed on which directory? This opt test directory, right? Let me show you. If I have some file, let's see, I don't have that test.txt file. In my build context, I don't have test.txt. So I created the test.txt. I'm copying like this. So this is my working directory. So this file will be copied to this directory. When I do this cmd pwd, what directory I can see? I'm just executing pwd while starting the container. So let me build this image. Now, if I create a container, can I see that as my working directory? If I create a container interactively also, if I create a container interactively, -it, if I create a container interactively, now what is the CMD now? I have a CMD, so I have a CMD here. So now I'm creating a container interactively. I'm creating a container interactively. Now this will be replaced with this one. Now will I go inside the container now? That is what the meaning of command, right? I am creating a container interactively. I have a command, not entry point. So this will be replaced with this one? That is what we learned 10 minutes back. Now I will go inside that container. I'll go inside that container. Now can I see the test directory? How come I landed it to the test directory? How come I directly landed into the test directory? Because what is the working directory which we set for that image or container? Why I directly land? Because we have set the working directory using which instruction? Using workdir, we can change the working directory of the container or the image. All the subsequent instructions, will it be executed on that working directory? It will be executed on top of that working directory. This is working directory. Now, let me show you one Docker file example for that. Let's take this application. So now, not this one, let's take this one. Now, if you see here, we are using this as a base image. We are executing some commands. We are creating a directory and we are copying some file. Later, I change that as a working directory. That workdir is this one, opt/app now. Since this directory is already there in the previous layer, will this command will create this folder again, or it will just switch the directory? In the previous layer, this directory has been already there, created. Is it going to create that directory again, or it will just switch the directory? It will just switch the directory because this is already there in the previous layers. In the previous layers, it's already there, this /opt app. So that is what I am trying to do here, switching. Suppose if I remove this instruction, if I remove this instruction and if I directly create this workdir, then it will create. Now let me do this way. Now this is my Docker file. Now, if I don't do that, will this instruction will be executed successfully? Now, this is the base image. Will this instruction will be executed successfully? This copy instruction will be executed successfully? No. Then suppose if I do this way, here itself I am doing this. No, the order doesn't, because here This is where I have to define. So if I do this way, since the directory is not there, is it going to create and switch? Is it going to create and switch? So what is this? I have not hard coded the value. What is this? What is the value of this here? What is the value of this one? I am using dollar and this one. So what is this? I created one environment variable. In environment variable, how do we refer the environment variables? Can I use dollar then environment variable? So I can refer this way. So this time it is going to create and switch. Then here I am not giving the complete path. My jar file is part of /opt, but am I giving something like this /opt/ this jar file name to start Java process? Not required. Since that is already a working directory, can I directly give something like this without giving this complete path where I copied my jar file? Can I give something like this? Because this is the working directory. We are in the directory. So this command will be executed from which directory? The current directory, this one. Okay. So we can set the working directory. We can set the working directory using this work dir. Using work dir, we can set the working directory. And again, I am repeating, if the directory doesn't exist, is it going to create and switch? Yes. We can set a working directory for an image or container, basically. And a container, basically, image or container. Now, let's see what is this env. We have one more instruction called env. What is this env? We have something like this env arg. The name itself is saying env. What can we do with env? Env. We can set an environment variable. Environment variables, not variables. Environment variables. So we can set an environment variables using env. Suppose if you understand this one, if you see this image, like suppose I have some images, Docker images. Oh, sorry, I am inside the container. Let me come out. Docker images. If I inspect some image, let's say, let me inspect this image, Tomcat image. Tomcat and this tag. Now, if you see, how come I can see these environment variables like path environment variable, Java home variable, Tomcat Catalina home directory environment variable? So how come we can see these environment variables? So these environments variables has been set using what instruction? Using what instruction these environment variables has been set for that image? Using env. So I can set an environment variables. I can set an environment variables using env. Using env, environment env. Can I able to access these environment variables within the image or while within the container also? While creating image or within the container also, will I able to refer these environment variables in any process? in any process, will I able to refer those environment variables that can be in a shell script, that can be in your Java code, or that can be some Python code within your container or within your Docker file instruction also. Will I able to refer these environment variables? Something like this. If you see, here itself, if you see, we are setting environment variable like this project underscore home. Do you see in the Docker file itself, in the Docker file instruction itself, can we refer that environment variable? Yes. But if I do this way, will it work? If I do this way, will it work? I am referring environment variable here, but I am defining later. Will it work this way? No, it is not going to work. Okay, this way. So I am defining environment variable, I am referring here. If I go inside the container also, if I execute the env, will I able to see all these environment variables? Or if I refer that environment variable in any process, that can be your Java process, Python process, if I will I able to access that environment variable within the container also? Within the container also, do we able to access that environment variable? That can be any process like Tomcat, Java, Python code, wherever. We can access that environment variable. We can set environment variable and we can access. So how to set? Key, key and value. Key and value. So something like this. That can be any environment variable. That can be path. That can be your own environment variable. Something like this. That can be your own environment variable. That can be Java home. That can be Catalina home. Key value pairs. Key and value. Wherever this one. So these environment variables I can access anywhere in my image. While creating an image also, or in a container also, we can access environment variables like this. Now in my Docker file, let's say I'm just executing env command. Let me build the image. Now these are the environment variables as of now. But from where these environment variables has been defined? Did I define any of these environment variables in our Docker file? I'm executing cmd env so that this environment is getting printed. But where this environment variables has been defined? In the base image. Right? So this present working directory that has been defined as a working directory in our Docker file here. So except this one, other environment variables has been defined in the base image. If required, will I able to define my own environment variable? Just to give an example, I'm doing this like this. Env, like something like this. Something like this. If required, can I refer that environment variable here also? Something like this. Now, I can see this environment variable in the container also. Let me build the image. Let me create a container. Now, can I see that environment variable, whatever has been added in the image, will I able to access that in the container also in any process, that project home? So we can set an environment variables using env. We can set environment variables using env. Like suppose you are running one application. If you want to pass some environment variables for that application, can I define those environment variables in a Docker file? For your application, you want to pass some environment variables. We can define that using env. Now, the way we have a env, there is a one more instruction called arg. There is a one more instruction called arg. So what is this arg? So this argument, we can pass arguments to the Docker build, which means we can define arguments. We can define arguments in the sense variables. We can define arguments in a Docker file, which we can refer while creating an image. While creating an image, within Docker file. Kind of a variables. Kind of a variables. I can define arg name equals to value. Suppose in my Docker file, I have defined argument something like this. Package name, like let's say jar name, like application.jar. Can I refer this argument in any other instruction in a Docker file? Whether it is a run, whether it's a copy, can I refer this argument like this again? Anywhere. Something like this. Any instruction. But this argument, will I able to refer or will I able to access these arguments in containers? Once the container is created out of that image, the way we are able to access environment variables, will I able to refer these arguments in a container? Will I able to refer these arguments in a container? No. This can be referred only while creating an image itself. And also, I want to parameterize my Docker build. I don't want to hard code some values in the Docker file. Is it possible to pass arguments to the Docker build at runtime? Let's say, let's take this use case. I don't want to hard code this name. Let's say, I don't want to hard code this name. Is it possible to pass this value at runtime while creating an image? Then what concept we can use? Can I use this build arguments concept, this args concept? We can use this build arguments concept, args concept. Sometimes in the interview also they are going to ask this question. Is it possible to parameterize my Docker build? Same like in Jenkins. Also, will you able to parameterize your pipeline? Will you able to pass parameters, arguments to your pipeline in Jenkins while executing your pipeline? Do you able to pass some arguments parameterization, right? Like this, is it possible to pass? Is it possible to parameterize the Docker build? I don't want to hard code this one. Let's say, is it possible to pass it this value to my Docker build at runtime? Or just giving an example. Or let's say this one. Let's say I don't want to hard code the tag version of the base image. Is it possible to pass something like this as an argument while building the image? I want to say this version of this image you have to use. I don't want to hard code. Is it possible to do that? I am trying to build an image, right? Now I don't want to hard code this. I don't want to always use this as a base image. I don't want to always use this as a base image. Now, while building, I should have an option, or I should be able to pass which base image has to be used, or this one. Some hard, I don't want to hard code. Is it possible to parameterize the Docker build? Now, I can say something like this, arg, something like this, base image tag. The default value, I can have a default value something like this. Now, this argument, will I able to refer in anywhere in my Docker file? We can refer this anywhere. Now, as I already told, except arg, will I able to define any other instruction before from instruction? Can I define any other instruction except arg? No. Now I can define this way, but while at runtime also, suppose will I able to pass different value? I don't want to use this default value. We can use one option called -, build arg or build args, this argument name. Now instead of that one, if I say some different tag, something like this. Now what will be the value here? Now if I build this way, what will be the value? What version, what base image will be used? What base image will be used? Is it going to use this base image, or it is going to use this base image, the tag? Just to give an example, I am explaining this one. Using this arg concept, will I able to parameterize my Docker builds? Suppose this package name also. Can I refer something like this? And will I able to pass that also as an argument? That can be something like this. So we can parameterize the Docker builds. We can parameterize Docker builds using build instruction. Something like this. Now let's say arg, something like this, key and value. That can be any key. That can be any key argument like this. Value can be any value. Now this argument, will I able to refer in any instruction? That can be in run instruction, that can be in CMD instruction. So I can refer this argument in the Docker file. But will these arguments will be available once the container is created? I mean to say, once the image is created within my container, will I able to access these arguments? Let's say something like this. I'm saying tag name. So here I can say arg tag name, something like this. So now what base image will be used? Now, if I don't pass also, what is the default value of this argument? Colon latest Docker build -t image1 dot. I am not passing any argument. If you see, the base image is used as this colon latest. Now, instead of this base image, the base tag, I want to use different tag. Different. Let's see what is there. Let's see what is there in CentOS. Right now, I want to use maybe this as a base image now. This as a base image, or this as a base image, the tag. Without touching my Docker file, without updating my Docker file, will I able to pass that value? Without updating my Docker file, am I able to parameterize my Docker build? Something like this, -- build args. This is my argument name. The value, if I pass this, or if I pass this, is it going to use this tag? This will be replaced with this one now, this value, build arg. It is not args, build arg. Now, if I inspect that image, right, I can see what base image has been used. Now, instead of this one, let's say this one. Let's say this one. Without touching my Docker file, if you see, is it pulling that base image now? CentOS 0.79, this one. Is it using this as a base image now? So this way, do we able to pass arguments to the Docker build? Do we able to parameterize Docker builds using this arg concept? And we can pass at runtime also. So these kind of use cases also you will have, right? These kind of use cases also you will have in the project. You want to parameterize your Docker builds. But now, once the container is created, let's say image has been created. This image has been created. If I go inside the container, if I create that container, will I able to access that arguments in a container? I am going inside that container interactively using that image. I am creating a container. Will I able to access those arguments, whatever has been defined, that arguments? So I have defined argument as, argument as what? Argument as this one, tag name. Now, do you see, is those arguments will be accessible within the container? No. But whatever environment variables has been set, will I able to access those environment variables? Using env, I have set some environment variables. Do we access those environment variables? In the container, can we access that environment variables? Yes. So this is how you can use env. So if your time is very bad, in the interviewer may ask this question also. What is difference between env and arg? if they are expecting experts in the Docker, they may ask this question also: what is difference between env and arg? What is difference between env and arg? Env, environment variables. Args, just normal variables. If it is an environment variable, will I able to access those environment variables within the container, within the image also? But if it is a normal argument, if it is a normal argument, we can have that argument can be referred only within the image while creating an image. So I already told multiple times, Chandan is asking one question again, same question. What is the only instruction which I can define before from instruction? I told, I think 2-3 days back also, and today also we explained. What is the only instruction which I can define before from? Only one instruction which I can define is arg. Can I define any other instruction except arg before from instruction? No. Now let's say in my Docker file, let's say I am not defining this argument, I am referring. I am not defining this argument, I am referring. And I am not passing also at runtime. And I am not passing also this at runtime. I am just referring without defining. Now, is it working? It is not working. Because I not defined in the Docker file and I am not passing at runtime also. But if I define here, let's see, arg tag name, something like this. Again, is it working even though I define? Now, even though I defined, it is not working because I am referring before it has been defined. I am referring before it has been defined. Like you take any shell script or Java programmatic language, will I able to refer one variable without defining that variable? Like, can I refer variable first, then can I define a variable? Like shell script, whatever you take. So similarly, I am referring here, I am defining later. That's why it is not working. Now, even though I don't define here, is it possible for me to pass at runtime? I am not defining at all. Is it possible to pass at runtime without defining? Now, if I do this way, if you see, is it taking? If you see, tag name, is it taking? I am passing at runtime. I am passing that at runtime as a build argument, but still, is it taking? So which means, do you need to define variable while passing at runtime also? At least do you need to have that variable defined with some default value? You need to have with the default value, right? So that if you don't pass that one, it will take that argument. Okay. So do you guys clear what is difference between env, arg? What is difference between cmd, entry point, run, copy, add, workdir? These are the instructions which we discussed so far. Docker file is very, very important. That's why we are spending a lot of time to understand. We have a few more instructions, very simple, like this. So tomorrow I will continue with these instructions and we will Dockerize some applications. So tomorrow we'll continue with the rest of the Docker file instructions, and also we'll Dockerize some Python based applications, Node.js based applications, how to create a Docker images for Python based applications, for Node.js based applications. We'll see tomorrow. Try to practice, try to execute, try to create some dummy Docker files, play around with all these instructions so that you can understand what is what. So I'll continue tomorrow, guys. Thank you. We'll see you tomorrow. Tomorrow also we'll continue with the Docker file instructions.